Millionaire took her mute daughter to the playground and froze when a black man made her speak for the first time. "My God, get your daughter away from that man right now." Patricia Whitmore's shrill voice cut through the morning air at the exclusive Meadowbrook Hills playground like a knife. Her perfectly manicured fingernails pointed directly at Marcus Thompson, a 35-year-old black man who was crouching next to a 7-year-old girl. Little Emma Richardson had just uttered her first word in 3 years. A single word that made her mother, billionaire Victoria Richardson, freeze completely. Hello. Victoria couldn't process what she had just witnessed. Emma hadn't spoken since the accident that killed her father, and now, in front of a complete stranger, she had broken 3 years of absolute silence. "Victoria, you can't let your daughter interact with people like that," whispered Patricia, lowering her voice just enough to sound conspiratorial. "Especially here, in our playground. What kind of example are you setting?" Marcus stood up slowly, his hands still dirty from the garden where he worked as a landscaper. His eyes met Victoria's for a brief moment, and she saw something there that disturbed her deeply. Not anger or embarrassment, but an unshakable calm, as if he had faced this situation 1,000 times before. "Mommy, he heard me," Emma whispered, her little voice still weak but crystal clear. "He really heard me." Victoria swallowed hard. As CEO of Richardson Tech, one of the largest assistive technology companies in the country, she had invested millions in communication research. She had hired the best therapists, neurologists, and child trauma specialists. And now, a gardener had achieved in 2 minutes what years of treatment had failed to accomplish. "Emma, come here now," Patricia ordered, holding out her hand impatiently. "Your mother needs to take you home." But Emma didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on Marcus, who smiled kindly as he put his gardening tools away in a worn box. "Thank you," Emma said again, this time louder. Marcus nodded respectfully. "It was a pleasure to meet you, little Emma. Keep using that beautiful voice." He turned to Victoria with an almost imperceptible bow. "Have a good day, Mrs. Richardson." As he walked away pushing his tool cart, Victoria noticed for the first time the scars running down his arms and the slight limp in his left leg. There was something about this man that transcended the appearance of a simple gardener. Patricia shook her head disapprovingly. "These people always try to take advantage of families like ours. I bet he's already planning some kind of scam or blackmail." But Victoria couldn't take her eyes off Marcus disappearing through the back gate. Emma had spoken. For the first time in 1,995 days, her daughter had used her voice. And not with just anyone, with a man whom Patricia and the other mothers in the neighborhood treated as invisible. At that moment, Victoria realized that there were 2 mysteries before her. Why her daughter had spoken to this particular man, and why she felt that Marcus Thompson was harboring secrets far greater than anyone could imagine. If you're wondering how a simple gardener achieved what millions of dollars in treatment couldn't, stay with us, because this story of prejudice and unexpected discoveries is just beginning, and what you're about to discover about Marcus will completely change your perspective on who really deserves our attention and respect. The following Monday, Marcus Thompson arrived at work as he always did, 45 minutes before opening time, carrying his worn toolbox and a thermos of black coffee. What he didn't expect was to find a warning letter stuck to the back gate of the Meadowbrook Hills condominium. Inappropriate behavior with minors. Violation of professional conduct rules. Last warning before dismissal. Signed by Patricia Whitmore, President of the Residents Association. Marcus folded the paper calmly and put it in his pocket. At 35, after 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic and 3 years fighting the system to get any job that would take him with his injured leg, he knew this script well. The difference was that this time, he wasn't alone in the fight. Marcus. Emma's voice cut through the morning air. The girl ran across the lawn toward him, completely ignoring Patricia's angry shouts. "Emma Richardson, come back here right now." Patricia advanced across the lawn with her usual expression of superiority. "How many times do I have to tell you not to talk to the staff?" Marcus bent down to Emma's height, who arrived panting and smiling. "Good morning, little one. How are you today?" "Very well. Last night I told Mom about you, and she was very happy that I did." Emma spoke quickly, as if she wanted to make up for 3 years of silence at once. "She said you must be a very special person." Marcus's smile deepened, but Patricia was already beside him, her face red with indignation. "This is unacceptable. You are deliberately disobeying the rules of the condominium by interacting with the residents." Patricia pointed her finger at Marcus. "And you, young lady," she turned to Emma, "are being extremely rude by ignoring direct instructions." "But he's my friend," Emma said simply, taking Marcus's hand. Patricia grew even more furious. "Friends? What nonsense. You have no idea where this man came from, what kind of life he's had, what kind of person he really is." Marcus stood up slowly, but kept Emma's hand in his. "You're right, Mrs. Patricia. Miss Emma doesn't know anything about me." His eyes met hers with a disturbing calmness. "Just as you don't." Something in Marcus's tone made Patricia hesitate for a moment. There was an authority in his voice that contrasted sharply with his position as a gardener. "Victoria." Patricia shouted when she saw Emma's mother approaching. "I need to talk to you urgently about your daughter's behavior toward the staff." Victoria reached them with an expression that was difficult to read. In the last 48 hours, she had slept only a few hours, obsessed with finding out more about the man who had made her daughter talk. As the CEO of an assistive technology company, she knew the statistics. Children with post-traumatic selective mutism took an average of 2 to 5 years to regain their voice, and that was with intensive therapy. Marcus had achieved it in 2 minutes. "Good morning, Marcus," Victoria said, completely ignoring Patricia. "Emma won't stop talking about you." "Mommy, look." Emma let go of Marcus's hand and ran a few steps. "He taught me that when you run in the garden, you have to step on the soft grass, not the hard grass, because the hard grass is hurting." Victoria watched Marcus with growing curiosity. "Do you know about botany?" "A little," Marcus replied modestly. "Gardening helps me stay calm." "Victoria, you can't allow this." Patricia interrupted, exasperated. "The rules of the condominium are clear. Employees are not to fraternize with residents." "Patricia," Victoria said coldly, "Emma hadn't spoken in 3 years. If Marcus has been able to help her, I not only allow this interaction, I encourage it." Patricia's face turned pale. "You don't understand. People like him always have ulterior motives. He's probably already planning some kind of extortion or blackmail." Marcus remained silent, but Victoria noticed how his muscles tensed slightly, like a soldier preparing for a confrontation. What kind of ulterior motives could a gardener have? Victoria asked, but her eyes never left Marcus. That was when she noticed it. The posture. The way he constantly scanned the room, cataloging every exit, every movement. The scar on his neck that barely showed above his shirt collar. And most of all, the way he answered questions. Always precise, always controlled, like someone used to being under pressure. "Marcus," Victoria said calmly, "have you worked with children before?" Patricia snorted. "What kind of question is that? He's a gardener." But Marcus looked directly at Victoria, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that made her swallow hard. It wasn't vulnerability or gratitude. It was recognition. As if he knew exactly what she was thinking. "I've worked with many people who needed to find their voice," he replied enigmatically. In that instant, Victoria knew 2 things with absolute certainty. First, that Marcus Thompson was not a simple gardener. And second, that Patricia Whitmore had seriously underestimated the man she was trying to humiliate. What neither of them could have imagined was that in the days to come, their assumptions about Marcus would be completely shattered, revealing a truth so stunning that it would forever change the way they looked at anyone they dared to judge by appearances. That same afternoon, Marcus Thompson did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He called Washington, D.C. "Colonel Davidson." His voice was firm, but there was a vulnerability he couldn't completely hide. "This is Dr. Marcus Thompson. I need my complete military records." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Marcus? My God, son, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you since you left the hospital. You just disappeared." Marcus looked out the window of the small apartment he shared with 2 other veterans. His hands, still dirty from working in the garden, trembled slightly as he held the phone. "I've been finding myself, Colonel. But now I need to prove who I really am." "Job problems? Discrimination?" "Something like that." Marcus took a deep breath. "I need all my medical certificates, decorations, and especially the report from the mission in Kandahar. You know, that mission." There was another silence. "Marcus, you saved 17 Afghan children from that bombed hospital. You performed emergency surgery without anesthesia for 14 hours straight while the place was under attack. You're a decorated war hero and one of the best surgeons this nation has ever had. I don't feel that way when someone looks at me and sees just a troublesome black gardener." The colonel sighed heavily. "I'll email everything today. And Marcus, it's time you remembered who you really are." Meanwhile, at the Meadowbrook Hills condominium, Patricia Whitmore was having the most important meeting of her career as president of the Residents Association. Sitting in her immaculate living room, surrounded by 5 other women from the local elite, she laid out her plan with the confidence of someone who had never faced real opposition. "Ladies, we need to understand the gravity of the situation," Patricia said, pouring tea into Chinese porcelain cups. "We have a disruptive element infiltrating our community. And now Victoria Richardson, our most influential neighbor, is defending this individual." Margaret Thornton, the mayor's wife, shook her head disapprovingly. "Patricia, have you seen the way he looks at women? There's something definitely suspicious about his behavior with the children." "Exactly." Patricia tapped her spoon on the cup emphatically. "And Victoria is blinded by her own family problems. That girl of hers is, well, you know, different. She can't speak normally. It's only natural that Victoria would cling to anyone who shows an interest in her." Catherine Blackwell, heiress to an oil fortune, laughed dismissively. "People like him always know exactly how to manipulate vulnerable situations. I bet he's already identified Victoria as a target because of her daughter's condition." "We need to document everything," Patricia continued, picking up a notepad. Every interaction he has with the children, every time he leaves the staff area, every inappropriate word. I'll even hire a private investigator if necessary. What none of them knew was that Marcus Thompson had grown up in situations where his life depended on observing every detail, every movement, every word whispered with malicious intent. 3 tours in Afghanistan as a combat medic had not only refined his surgical skills, they had honed his strategic and survival abilities into something lethal. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work carrying something different besides his tools. A small, discreet digital recorder and a smartphone that Victoria had purposely forgotten in the garden the night before, after programming it to automatically record conversations. "Good morning, Marcus," Emma said, running toward him as had become routine. But today, her mother accompanied her with a determined expression. "Marcus, I need to talk to you," Victoria said, completely ignoring the disapproving glances of the other mothers passing by. "Emma told me that you know a lot about medicinal plants. How does one learn such things working as a gardener?" Marcus smiled, but his eyes remained alert. "Knowledge is like a seed, Mrs. Richardson. It can grow in any soil, regardless of where it was originally planted." At that moment, Patricia appeared marching through the garden with 2 other women, carrying a briefcase and a camera. "Victoria, I need to officially document this further breach of protocol," Patricia announced loudly enough to draw the attention of other residents. "Employees are not to fraternize with residents, especially not in this intimate and inappropriate manner." Marcus straightened slowly, and Victoria noticed for the first time how different he looked when he assumed his full posture. Taller, more imposing, with a natural authority that contrasted completely with the humble gardener everyone thought they knew. "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus said calmly, "may I ask what specific protocol I am violating by speaking politely to a resident who addressed me?" Patricia hesitated for a moment, surprised by Marcus's impeccable articulation and professional tone. You know very well that you shouldn't be interacting in this way with people like Mrs. Richardson and her daughter." Marcus finished, his voice still calm but with an intensity that made Patricia take a step back. "Could you be more specific about what kind of people those are, please?" Victoria watched in fascination as Marcus, with just 2 direct questions, had put Patricia in a position where any answer would reveal exactly the prejudice she was trying to disguise as professional concern. It's not about types of people." Patricia stammered, realizing she had fallen into a verbal trap. "It's about maintaining order and the established rules." "I see," Marcus nodded respectfully. "And are these rules documented anywhere? I would very much like to review them to ensure that I am complying with all protocols properly." At that moment, Victoria knew with absolute certainty that Marcus Thompson was not only smarter than anyone in that condominium had realized. He was playing a completely different game than anyone imagined. That was when Patricia, frustrated and publicly humiliated, made the mistake that would seal her fate. "Listen here," she hissed, lowering her voice, but not enough to prevent Victoria's strategically positioned smartphone from picking up every poisonous word. "People like you can fool some naive people, but I know exactly what you are and what you're trying to do here." Marcus smiled then, and Victoria felt a chill when she realized it wasn't a smile of submission or embarrassment. It was the smile of someone who had just been given exactly the ammunition he needed for a war Patricia didn't even know she was fighting. What none of the women present could have imagined was that in the next 24 hours, their perceptions of power, privilege, and true superiority would be completely destroyed by a man they had underestimated so grotesquely that they had turned their own arrogance into the most powerful weapon against themselves. 48 hours later, Patricia Whitmore called an emergency meeting of the Residents Association. The condominium's event hall was packed, 23 families, including Victoria Richardson, who arrived accompanied by Emma and carrying a briefcase that made Marcus smile discreetly when he saw it. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia began, her voice laden with artificial authority, "I have called this meeting to address an extremely serious security issue. We have an individual in our community who poses a potential threat to our families." Marcus was sitting in the back row, still wearing his gardener's uniform, but there was something different about his posture. His shoulders were straight, his eyes alert, scanning the room with the precision of someone accustomed to assessing threats in seconds. "Over the past week," Patricia continued, "I have documented multiple protocol violations involving gardener Marcus Thompson. Inappropriate interactions with minors, disregard for rules of conduct, and behavior that we consider suspicious." Margaret Thornton stood up, brandishing a folder. "We hired a private investigator to check this individual's background. What we found is disturbing. Clean criminal record, but a history of psychological problems related to military service," Catherine Blackwell added with malicious satisfaction. "PTSD, permanent injuries, multiple psychiatric hospitalizations. Clearly unstable." Victoria watched Marcus carefully. She expected to see anger, humiliation, or at least discomfort. Instead, he looked amused, like someone watching a show he already knew the ending to. "I move," Patricia announced dramatically, "for the immediate dismissal and permanent banishment of Marcus Thompson from this property. All in favor?" 17 hands shot up immediately. It was then that Marcus slowly rose to his feet. The silence in the hall was instant and heavy. "May I ask a question before the final vote?" His voice had changed completely. It was no longer the humble, careful speech of a gardener. It was the voice of someone accustomed to commanding life and death situations. Patricia hesitated, clearly irritated by the interruption. "You have no right to speak at this meeting. You are only an employee." "I understand," Marcus nodded respectfully. "But as the discussion involves me, I thought it would be fair to allow me to clarify some incorrect information that has been presented." He walked calmly to the front of the hall, and Victoria noticed that his limp had all but disappeared. Each step was deliberate, controlled, authoritative. "First," Marcus said, removing an envelope from his pocket, "I would like to clarify my clean criminal record." The lady's private investigator did a rather incomplete job. He opened the envelope and removed a series of official documents. Dr. Marcus Thompson, combat surgeon, United States Army. 2 bronze stars for valor in combat, a military medical medal of honor, and he paused dramatically. A presidential citation for exceptional service to the nation. The silence in the hall became suffocating. "During my last tour of duty in Afghanistan, I performed 17 emergency surgeries on children wounded during a bombing raid, working 14 hours straight under enemy fire. I saved every one of them." Patricia paled visibly. That doesn't change the fact that you raped." "Oh yes," Marcus interrupted her gently, removing a small digital recorder from his other pocket. "The rapes. I'd love to discuss that." He pressed play, and Patricia's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. "People like him always try to take advantage of families like ours. I bet he's already planning some kind of scam or blackmail." Several people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Marcus continued, "And here we have another interesting conversation." He pressed another button. Margaret Thornton's voice echoed, "Patricia, have you seen the way he looks at women? There's definitely something suspicious about his behavior around children." Margaret's face turned tomato red. "But my favorite," Marcus said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "is this one here." Catherine Blackwell's voice filled the silence. "People like him always know exactly how to manipulate vulnerable situations. I bet he's already identified Victoria as a target because of her daughter's condition." Victoria stood up abruptly, her expression a mixture of fury and determination. "Marcus, may I?" He nodded and handed her the makeshift microphone. "For the past 5 days," Victoria began, her voice controlled but laden with authority, "I have been closely observing the interactions between Marcus and my daughter. Emma hadn't spoken in 3 years. 3 years. I spent over $500,000 on treatments, therapies, specialists." She looked directly at Patricia. "Within 2 minutes of talking to Marcus, my daughter said her first word. Since then, she hasn't stopped talking, laughing, playing. He gave me my daughter back." Victoria opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. "So I did my own investigation. Dr. Marcus Thompson isn't just a war hero. He's a specialist in child trauma therapy, graduated from Johns Hopkins University. He worked for 5 years at Baltimore's leading pediatric hospital before enlisting." Patricia tried to interrupt, but Victoria continued relentlessly. "His psychological instability consisted of 3 months of voluntary therapy to deal with the loss of his best friend in combat, something any decent person would do. He has never had a single psychiatric hospitalization." Marcus took the microphone again. "Now, about my ulterior motives. I work as a gardener because no clinic or hospital in the city would hire me. Not because I'm unqualified. I have the credentials to run the pediatric department at any hospital in the country. But because," he looked directly at Patricia, "people like you would rather see the color of my skin than my diplomas." The silence was so absolute that the sound of the air conditioning seemed deafening. "Victoria Richardson offered me a position yesterday as Director of Human Development at her company, with a salary of $250,000 a year. I'll start on Monday." Patricia was practically shaking with anger and humiliation. That's a trap. You planned all this." "Patricia," Marcus said calmly, "the only thing I planned was to be kind to a child who needed help. Everything else was a consequence of the choices you made." He turned to face the entire assembly. "Every recording you've heard today was made in public areas of this condominium. Every prejudiced word, every malicious assumption, every attempt to humiliate me because of the color of my skin or my status as a veteran, all documented." Victoria stood up again. "As the new legal advisor to this community, I am informing you that Patricia Whitmore, Margaret Thornton, and Catherine Blackwell are being sued for racial discrimination, defamation, and harassment. The recordings will be turned over to the district attorney's office later today." Patricia's face was now completely livid. "You can't do that. We are respected members of this community." "You were," Marcus corrected gently. "And about my resignation," he smiled genuinely for the first time since he had met these women, "I just bought the penthouse in Building 5. We'll be neighbors." At that moment, as Patricia Whitmore realized that she had not only lost her position of power, but turned her own arrogance into the tool of her destruction, one question hung in the air. Would people capable of such prejudice learn any lessons from such humiliation? Or would they remain trapped in their own limited concepts, now without any power to hurt anyone? 6 months later, Marcus Thompson sat in his office on the 23rd floor of Richardson Tech, reviewing proposals for the company's new social inclusion program. Through the panoramic window, he could see the Meadowbrook Hills condominium, now a very different view from his former perspective. "Dr. Thompson?" His assistant appeared at the door. The city council meeting is confirmed for 3 o'clock. They want to discuss expanding the program to other communities. Marcus nodded, adjusting his custom-tailored tie. In 6 months, the assisted therapy program he had developed had transformed the lives of more than 200 children with communication disorders. The boy who had once been rejected from 12 job interviews because of his color and veteran status was now invited to speak at universities across the country. Across town, Patricia Whitmore signed the final divorce papers at a small law office. His husband had discovered the recordings through the court case and decided he no longer wanted to be associated with that kind of person. Words that echoed with bitter irony when they were directed at her. Alimony will be $1,200 a month, the lawyer informed her. And the apartment in Meadowbrook Hills will go to your ex-husband. Patricia swallowed hard. From president of the Homeowners Association to tenant of a small apartment in the suburbs, a fall that had happened with the speed of a public trial on social media. Margaret Thornton was no better off. When the recordings were leaked, her husband lost his re-election bid for mayor by a humiliating margin. Catherine Blackwell saw her investments withdrawn due to corporate image issues. Meanwhile, at the Meadowbrook Hills playground, now renamed Dr. Marcus Thompson Park by unanimous vote of the new residents, Emma Richardson ran freely, chatting animatedly with other children about her plans for the future. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor like Uncle Marcus," she declared to Victoria, who watched with tears of joy in her eyes. Marcus arrived at the park that late afternoon, as he did every Friday. No longer pushing a tool cart, he drove up in a BMW and parked next to Victoria's car. "How was the council meeting today?" Victoria asked as they watched Emma play. "They approved the expansion to 5 cities," Marcus smiled. "And they offered me a permanent seat on the Public Health Committee." Victoria nodded, still impressed. "You know you changed not only Emma's life, but mine too, right? You taught me to see beyond appearances." Marcus watched a new family arrive at the park, a black father with his young son, clearly nervous in such an elegant setting. Without hesitation, he walked over to them. "First time here?" he asked the man kindly. "Yes, sir. My wife got a job at Richardson Tech, and we moved into the apartment over there." The man pointed shyly to one of the buildings. "Welcome to the neighborhood," Marcus smiled, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I live in the penthouse of Building 5. If you ever need anything, you can count on me." The relief on the man's face was instant. Later, as they walked back home, Victoria commented, "You know you could have just accepted her apology and moved on, right?" Marcus stopped and looked at her seriously. "Victoria, it wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure what happened to me didn't happen to anyone else." Patricia and the others learned that judging people by their appearance has real consequences. Emma ran up to them, still full of energy. "Uncle Marcus, are you coming to my recital at school next week?" "I wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart." As they walked into the sunset, Marcus reflected on how his life had changed. From invisible gardener to respected director, from rejected veteran to international speaker. The best revenge, he discovered, wasn't destroying those who had underestimated him. It was building something so extraordinary that their smallness became irrelevant. Patricia Whitmore tried to break a man she judged by the color of his skin and the scars of war. But she ended up discovering that true strength doesn't come from titles or money. It comes from the ability to turn pain into purpose, and prejudice into fuel to achieve unimaginable greatness. If this story has shown you that we should never judge anyone by their appearance, leave a comment telling us if you've ever been through something similar. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes underestimating someone is the biggest favor you can do for them.